Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, depending on where in the world you are joining me from. Me, I am Illuminati, and this is the Crypto and Cognac podcast show. As always, live every Thursday, 7 p.m. Atlantic Standard Time, sharp. And of course, when things are live, you have technical issues, right? But we here, I'm here. If I'm here, Stevie here, here, Henny here, right? So, welcome to this week's episode of the podcast, season 7, episode 25. We are talking about hacks in the crypto space. But before we do, we have a few things we have to take care of. First, some housekeeping, right? Starting, of course, we do lime dry mouth. So pour yourself a a glass. Cheers. Of Hennessy. Because it can't be the Crypto and Cognac podcast without some cognac, of course, right? Secondly, if this is your first time here with me, this is not a financial advisory podcast. I am not a financial advisor. Nothing that I share here this afternoon, last week, any week to come should be misconstrued as financial advice. The same way we have our yak is the same way we have our crypto conversations. What does that mean? On the rocks, ice, the ice rule, information, conversation, education. I share with you, you share with me, and hopefully on the other side of this, we all arrive at some new perspective, some new understanding around this crazy cryptic world of cryptocurrency. And like I said, today we are talking hacks. We are talking about security in the crypto and blockchain space. So, over the last 12 months, billions of dollars in crypto assets have been stolen. Not just from small retail investors, but we're talking about major protocols, exchanges, and some supposedly secure DeFi systems. Who is doing it? People claim there are some state-sponsored hackers, particularly North Korean, who have focused their sights on DeFi protocols. Why? I don't know. So that's my question as it relates to the state-sponsored hackers. But we're gonna talk about it. So first, let's talk about the scale of the problem. And I think when you start thinking about the numbers, you realize how significant this is. So in 2025 alone, crypto hacks and scams exceeded $3.5 billion in direct thefts, right? So scam-related losses pushed total illicit activity into the tens of billions. So 3.5 in direct theft. And when we look at all these scams and different things, including some meme coins and blah, 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 it pushes the number into the tens of billions globally. Now, in early 2026 until now, we have already seen hundreds of millions of dollars lost in a matter of weeks, as we have seen multiple protocols experience exploits. Now, I think overall, it's not what we've seen is attacks coming in varied functions, right? We've seen DeFi protocols being drained. We've seen cross-chain bridges being exploited. We've seen wallets being compromised through phishing and private key attacks. And we've seen entire ecosystems frozen after exploits. Crypto security is improving. So I don't want to scare you too much. We are doing a much better job when it comes to crypto security. However, the attackers are becoming even more sophisticated in a faster and at a faster pace. And the reality is that a hacker, someone who's seeking to do an exploit, they just have to get lucky once. Whereas the protocol, whereas the wallet holder, whereas the people charged with securing the networks, they have to be right 100% of the times. And if they're found to be deficient even one time, we're gonna see an exploit, a hack, like we've been seeing, right? So just to name a few of the higher profile hacks, we saw Volo lost millions in a one-day exploit. We saw multi-chain vulnerabilities being targeted, especially bridges, right? What we are seeing is that the networks themselves are not the ones that are being impacted, but it is those bridges. So it seems like the biggest structural weakness to this whole thing remains interoperability. And we know that for this thing to have the kind of impact, the kind of global adoption and functionality, interoperability continues to be a major hurdle that we have to get over, right? But there is where the biggest gap seems to be in security. We saw 𝐂𝐻𝐈𝐍 lost approximately 290 million through cross-chain manipulation. Basically, attackers exploited the verification layer between the blockchains rather than the core chain itself. So they say the weakest point between any chain is an individual link. So it is the link between these chains that is providing this point of weakness. So I think that is one of the areas we're going to see a lot more funding be deployed. We're going to see a lot more infrastructure development around bridges, because ultimately, importantly, here is interoperability, but the security attached or assigned to that interoperability has to be sorted, right? We also seen exchange and wallet attacks. So wallet compromises through phishing, leaking of private keys, of course, executive devices of protocols being compromised, and obviously the treasury being drained as a result. We've seen exchange-led level exploits resulting in sudden suspension and, of course, liquidity panic. So even the centralized platforms seem not to be immune, but the decentralized systems are proving even harder to defend, right? So how do we stop these groups of attackers who they don't just steal, right? Because they steal the money, one, they steal the on-chain value, but then they have to launder it across chains. They have to use mixers, they have to use bridges, they have to use DeFi layers to obscure the flow. So what we're seeing is not just cybercrime, but it's almost like it's, I heard one person call it digital economic warfare, right? And the reality is that when these attackers infiltrate and compromise a particular protocol, an exchange, a bridge, what is lost, what is stolen is not just the money that they make off it, right? So in the case of 𝐂𝐻𝐈𝐍, not just the 290 million, because obviously the reality is that immediately after that, the trust associated with those projects, the trust associated with this crypto blockchain space is damaged, right? Because this whole thing operates on the idea of not needing to, well, the idea of trust generally, right? So what we see is obviously when protocols are hacked, we see token prices immediately start crashing. We see liquidity being withdrawn immediately from these protocols. We see temporary freezing of withdrawals or governance panic by the teams. And all of this leads to, as we chase adoption, institutional hesitance around participating in DeFi. And I think this continues to be one of the challenges in terms of having crypto operate as its own independent financial system, as compared to it overlapping with the traditional financial system. The fact is that the real cost is not just about the stolen capital, but I think is how that and the fallout from that impacts adoption, who the adoption, where the adoption takes place, and who ultimately benefits from that adoption. And I mean, we see those hacks, we see those compromises, we see those exploits happening for a few reasons, right? Of course, code is money, right? Smart contracts are immutable, and of course, the bugs that may exist within those contracts are also permanent as well. Humans continue to be the weakest link, yeah, as from the beginning of time to now, right? And then we're seeing increased complexity in terms of our system. So we're seeing cross-chain systems, bridges, layered DeFi protocols, and because of that, we are seeing a more diverse level of opportunity for attacks. It's like a house with one window, one door. Somebody who trying to break in, they either have to come through the window or come through the door. Now, if the house has 1,000 different doors, 1,000 different windows, it provides a lot more opportunity for someone to break in via one of those doors and one of those windows. And now you have to put security in place to guard every single window, every single door, 24/7, right? So that's the easy way of explaining it. And then obviously, like I said before, the incentives are asymmetrical because an attacker only has to be successful once, whereas a platform, a protocol, a bridge, they have to make sure they get it right 100% of the times. If they fail even once, it could lead to a major exploit that ultimately impacts, like I said, not just the funds that are lost, but the trust associated with that platform. And a lot of times we see projects, protocols not recover after hacks. So crypto was built on the promise of a decentralized, trustless system. In 2026, we are seeing a new reality emerge, right? Trust hasn't disappeared. It has shifted to code. It has shifted bridges. It has shifted human behavior. And all those layers are constantly under attack. And the real question is not whether or not blockchain is secure. The real question becomes, can the ecosystem around blockchain mature fast enough before the attackers scale even further? Can our security outpace the development of the attackers seeking to exploit those gaps, right? And I think ultimately, if you are somebody in this space, whether you're an investor, whether you're a trader, whether you're a builder, whether you're just an observer, security is no longer, optional. It's no longer something that you take stock in by the way, right? It has to become core to your strategy of protecting yourself. It has to be core to the strategies that you look out for in the protocols, in the projects that you invest in, because the volatility in this market is not just tied to market moves, right? The next exploit is just waiting to happen, and that can mean everything or nothing as it relates to your investment, your whatever project you're building, whatever opportunities you are seeking, and how you participate in this space in the long haul. So, long story short, we have to get our shiz together before the criminals and those who have nefarious intents do. Ultimately, we have to work together. We have to start partnering. We have to see more collaboration between projects, blockchains, especially as it relates to building bridges, supporting the security around those bridges, supporting protocols, and finding a way that does not ultimately undermine this entire decentralized space, this censorship resistant space, in a way that allows us to have the security without having to give up the freedoms that we've worked so hard to build around. I think that is the biggest threat, right? I think if that is lost, we would have lost our way significantly. So how do we protect ourselves without giving up our freedom? It's something that we have to contend with in the digital space as well as in our real world space, especially in 2026 and beyond. So, no, we do not trade live. Right? So, that's my time. Thanks as always for joining. For those of you joining us for the first time, no, we are not a trader platform. We just talk about a micro and macroeconomic environment around this crypto space. We do not provide any financial advice. We do not encourage any sort of trade recommendations. We advise our people to do their own research always, right? As I say every week, and I will continue to say every day for the rest of my life, adoption is inevitable. Illuminati. OUT. Have a blessed one, guys. See you all next week.